All right, guys, unfortunately, my, I don't know, my laptop, my camera, my whatever equipment I'm using likes to just cut out after a while. I thought I got it fixed. In fairness, I went over an hour, so maybe it's doing something. So we're going to continue. I apologize. Unfortunately, you're going to have to finish this video in two separate videos, finish this discussion in two separate videos. I'm going to pick up where I left off. I was cut off last time. We're explaining the structure foundations of the law. Unfortunately, I know this isn't ideal, but I apologize. We weren't able to finish entirely in one video this very long discussion. So let's get back into it. So we just talked about law number 2, transform self-love into empathy, the law of narcissism. Clearly, empathy relies on that visceral, instinctual, experiential presence, that's magic structure, and then of course killing the ego, trying to turn the self-love, which is when the ego goes too far, into empathy. So magic, mental structure. Law number 3, see through people's masks, the law of role-playing. So emphasis on the experience that we just talked about of the magic structure and the shared meaning within a shared social order of the mythical structure. So when you're seeing through people's masks, you're not rationally, abstractly considering their actions and behaviors completely detached from them in an experiential sense. No, you're right there. When you're seeing through people's magic, you are experiencing. You are the magic structure is efficacious right there. And then, of course, you're looking for signs and meaning when you're trying to see through people's masks. That's mythical structure. Law number 4, determine the strength of people's character. The law of compulsive behavior. So obviously a reference to the mythical soul. Like I said earlier, ask a rationalist what character is and where it comes from, and you'll get a pretty good definition of what the soul is. When you talk about character, Robert, you're talking about the soul. Have the courage to say the soul. I don't care what rationalists say. They're idiots. They're morons. Don't listen to rationalists, okay? The soul is irrational. It's immeasurable. They'll never be able to be accounted for by rationality. It's dumb. Law number 5, become an elusive object of desire, the law of covetousness. So, of course, this is playing on the experience and mystery of the magical structure. The magical structure is shrouded in a sort of impenetrable darkness. The mysteries of the world, the mysteries of ancient Egypt and stuff, that's all magic structure. Anything mystery, anything that is unconcealed, that's magic structure, because, of course, the mental structure illuminates. It is diurnal waking consciousness. Got all this great stuff. So yeah, that's the magic structure. And law number 6, elevate your perspective, the law of short-sightedness. So perspective should be a dead giveaway that we're referencing the mental structure. Short-sightedness, sight, of course, being directly connected to perspectivity, perspectivity being the preceding discovery of rationality. So when you say elevate your perspective, what are you really saying? Deepen your ability to think abstract and conceptually. There you go. Law number 7, soften people's resistance by confirming their self-opinion. The law of defensiveness. One cannot have a self-opinion without possessing a preceding self. And a self is not possible without the mental structure. So feed people's ego. That's obviously the mental structure. You can't, kind of like I said, you can't feed people's self without having that there. The ego arises as a product of the objectified space that permeates rationality. If there's an object, there must be a corresponding subject that leads to the creation of the strong ego, the strong subject, the strong sense of I. Law number 8, change your circumstances by changing your attitude. The law of self-sabotage, baby. We have finally got here, Robert. I don't think you quite realize how profound this law number 8 is. We finally got to a rationality, baby. The reason why is because you can only change your attitude by changing your quantum logic. And quantum logic is an irrational transcendence of rational logic. The mouse pad is not necessarily just a mouse pad. It is both a mouse pad and a symbol of technological advancement in modernity, and it is also a symbol for my dad leaving me when I was 7 years old when he went to go get milk. Okay, so my question to you, Robert, is which one is this objectively? The answer to that is that this entity is all of them simultaneously, which of course transcends the laws of logic. If you are interested in hearing this in more detail, please go watch my Kill Rationalism video about quantum logic, quantum mechanics, and transcending your rationality. Like I said in my notes, I don't think you quite understand, Robert, how profound what it is you've touched on. There you go. Law number 9, confront your dark side, the law of repression. So most likely a reference to the mental structure's desire to illuminate and order the unperspectival world. So the dark side is only so from the perspective of a structure that operates best in diurnal waking consciousness, that is, in light or clarity. From the perspective of the magic structure, this darkness cannot and should not be illuminated. Nonetheless, we all have to control our anger and wrath, and thus must adequately restrain ourselves. It seems this is a reference to the attempt to traverse the death pull of the soul, and is admirable in that sense. So when you say confront your dark side, it seems to be from the position of diurnal waking consciousness and imposing space between you and the object of reflection. In this case, it would be your own soul. You are trying to traverse the death pull of the soul. And in a certain sense, I think it's admirable. Now, of course, Robert wouldn't acknowledge this. He would acknowledge this as character. Okay, we're talking about the same thing. So in many ways, it's a reference to the magical, mythical, and mental structure. We have the magical darkness, the mythical death pull of the soul, and the mental waking diurnal consciousness. Law number 10, beware the fragile ego, the law of envy, a reference obviously to the mental, as well as a subtle reference to the mythical, as envy derives from a mythical longing for meaning in a shared order. Ego, of course, like we said, that's the strong subject. And if you envy something, that means that you have imparted significance into the object or the person that you envy. That's mythical structure, the impartation of meaning through this sort of irrational myth, narrative, story, symbol, all that stuff. Law number 11, know your limits, the law of grandiosity, another seeming reference to the mental ego. Law number 12, reconnect to the masculine or feminine within you, the law of gender rigidity, the polar complementary nature of the mythical structure, baby. That's what this is a reference to. Yin and yang. Obviously, when he says, so the masculine or feminine, the polarity encompassed by these two poles is the same polarity that we find with men and women in the form of the anima and the animus. Now remember, if you look up the yin and the yang, there's a white side and a black side, but it's not all white, it's not all black. There's, on the white side, there's a little black dot. On the black side, there's a little white dot, which is to say that one of the poles is contained within the other. So that's exactly what you see with masculinity and femininity. So the man has, we'll say, the anima. I can't remember. I think it's animus. We'll say the animus, right? So the animus is the feminine aspects that you have internalized from your mother, in our case, if you're a male. Now, of course, it's vice versa the other way. If the women have the anima, these are the masculine traits that you have internalized from your father. You can very clearly see the polar complementarity. That's exactly what you just touched on here, Robert. This is a great law, by the way, and some of you need to read it. Some of you men out there could use a little sensitivity, could use a little femininity. That's why you get nothing done. You have no appreciation of the totality of the constitution of the human condition. You deride sensitivity. You mock it. You try to close off any healthy channels of it, and that's why you get nothing done. On one hand, you're whining that all the world is irrational morons. On the other hand, you're running to me crying when people reject you irrationally. Get over it. Law number 13, advance with a sense of purpose, the law of aimlessness. So aimlessness implies the need for direction, and of course direction implies the mental structure. This could also be a reference to the myth that every individual lives by, the myth that animates their rational actions. We kind of talked about that earlier. You can always discover this myth, by the way, by asking. Let's say you're into politics. You can just ask, real quick, why do you get involved in politics in the first place? Well, because, they'll respond, well, because insert myth or story as to why justice is meaningful. So if they say, I entered politics to fight injustice, they presuppose a story in which justice and injustice both exist and fight. There's a sort of progression where one wins and the other loses. And they are a symbol of the good. So not only are we in this story of fighting of justice for injustice, I as the individual am a symbol of the transmitter of good, of justice. So this is very mythical. This is mythical structure. This is what animates our rational actions. It's just, like I said earlier, it's a small-scale myth, and it's individual, but it's a myth nonetheless. Every human needs this. This should not be rationally deconstructed. This should not be disrespected. This should not be supplanted. As a matter of fact, we need to take this more seriously because we're all working on it, but no one wants to admit it because it makes us sound irrational. Any symbolic or emotional significance you impart to an object / the world is a product of the mythical structure, not the mental, and should be respected. It's what makes the world a better place at the end of the day. Law number 14, resist the downward pull of the group, the law of conformity. So this is a reference to the efficient mental structure's ability to resist the downward pull of the deficient collective aspects of the unperspectival world. So one of the great benefits of rationality and the ego, it allows the individual to resist, as he calls it, the downward pull of the group. So mass psychology or group phenomena occur when the individual ego regresses and is rendered impotent, exposing him to the deficient aspects of collectivism. You don't want that, because then we get the terrible things we got with the Nazis, with the communists. You don't want that. You want to have a healthy balance between individual ego and a drive towards the collective, rather than individual over the collective and collective over the individual. Law number 15, make them want to follow you, the law of fickleness. I think this is most likely a reference to the magic structure. The charisma of a leader in the moment, experientially, like I said, in an experiential sense, cast a spell on the follower and causes them to follow the leader. Think cults at their worst and great generals at their best. So why is Will Smith so charismatic? It's almost like he casts a spell on you. What is that? That's obviously a reference to the magical structure. So the spell aspect and the experience, that's magic structure. Entitlement most likely arises from the disconnect with the magical unity, kind of like I was talking about earlier. So that's... Wait, why did I don't know why I even put that point in there. Law number 16. See the hostility behind the friendly facade, the law of aggression. So the aggression is clearly a reference to the magic structure. Aggression presupposes the vital instincts unrestrained by the rational ego. So in many sense, we have a reference to the magic structure. We also have a reference to the mental structure, insofar as it isn't a factor here. And as such, it's also, that's kind of like I just said. Also, it could be a reference to the mythical structure, insofar as you're searching for signs, meaning, that can be channeled through the rational ego for healthy ends. So you're looking for meaning that will offer you real truth about their motivation. So a little bit of all three. Law number 17, this is a big one. Seize the historical moment. The law of generational myopia. Robert, you have finally hit on something that I don't think you realize is profound as it is. This, of course, when you say seize the historical moment, this is time as an intensity, baby. If we're seizing the moment, that implies that not only is the moment distinct from others, but that it is charged with certain qualities that must be seized upon for effective ends. Okay, think BLM after George Floyd's death, or the grab for power among the Soviet Union officials after Stalin died. Either one, both of these examples, there was a moment that was intense and distinct, and then political actors used that to enact their political agenda. The moment is ripe and they couldn't let it pass. Of course, the qualitatively distinct nature of moments, in addition to connecting them to an internal field of presence, is impossible under the 3D rational understanding of time. If time is this continued external order duration, like the Tracy Lawrence song, Time Marches On, that's not possible. Every moment is equal, but of course every moment's not equal, because if it is, you wouldn't be able to seize the historical moment. So yes, you need to take this far more seriously, Robert. This is a very, very, very profound thing you've non-consciously touched on. Think Napoleon, Robert. I know you're a big fan of Napoleon Bonaparte. Why are you a fan of Napoleon Bonaparte? Because he can adapt. Why can he adapt? Because he non-consciously understands time as an intensity. He recognizes that moments are different. Okay, my plan that I implemented at 7 p.m. when the battle started is different than what I need to implement at 7:30 or at this particular moment, because things have changed, right? I didn't take into account that the other side has an ally, and now the qualities of this moment are different. So now I can't wait for patience. I need to be urgent, right? So what Napoleon was doing, he was non-consciously looking out at the qualities that charge the present moment and adapting to them, rather than fighting against them with this rational nonsense. Finally, the last freaking topic on this godforsakenly super long video. Law number 18, meditate on our common mortality. The law of death denial. I think you know what this is a reference to. Obviously a reference to the mythical polarity of the life pole and the death pole of the soul, situating us firmly in the mythical structure. This is only a law for rationalists, by the way. Life and death have been placed into antithetical dualistic opposition, and the former has been privileged over the latter. Death denial can only come about when you place these in the rational framing and then privilege life over death. It's a false understanding. Death is not a perspectival succession of life, but is contained within life, and vice versa. in nature with their polar complementarity. Remember the yin and the yang that I just talked about. So it is the movement between the two regions of our soul, the life pole and the death pole, that constitute our soul and allow us to advance the human spirit forward. It's allowed us to be more virtuous. It allows us to grow. In the mythical structure, this polar complementarity was sustained, meaning that people didn't fear death at all because it wasn't placed in this dualistic opposition. It was the counterpole to life. There's nothing to fear. It was not a void, but a portal to a protective spiritual enclosure where the terrestrial life here also formed a polar complement to the spiritual life there. It's psychic contentment and union. It's got nothing to do with this rationalist one or the other privileging. The magic structure, too, did not fear death because everything was unified, and when someone died, they also believed that they were transported to this sort of separate realm, but their distinction was it wasn't really separate in a polar complementarity sense. It was all unified. They didn't think about death. They didn't worry about the meaning of it, but they did ritualize it. The dead become spirits of the dead, and their effectuality is equal to that of living on earth in accordance with magical unity. The rigor mortis caused a numinous experience, essentially, in which the dead were imparted with demonic content. So when you have the people in the purely magic structure and they saw one of their tribesmen die, there must have been a certain uneasiness that caused the magic man a numinous experience to impart mana to it. The point is, either way, it has nothing to do with fearing death. Death, in this sense, it's a spiritual, it's part of a spiritual protective enclosure. It's in many ways psychologically content. It's got nothing to do with this anxiety and this fear of death, which, by the way, if you want to have a pretty good understanding of the perils and the pitfalls of this rationalist understanding of death, where it's a perspectival succession of life rather than being contained within life, check out my Substack. I did a film review for one of my favorite new movies. It's called Wild Strawberries by Ingmar Bergman. It's so good. And we talked about the Faustian myth of deed and death. We talked about death denial. We talked about all this stuff, anti-rationalism. That'll be where we end it today. I apologize for this 2 separate videos finishing out this one discussion. That really kind of pissed me off. But there's no way I'm re-recording an hour, 20-minute video just so it can happen again. I love you guys. Let me know if you guys found this insightful. I'm a little tired at the moment. Let me know if you found this insightful. Let me know if you want me to continue. If you want me to, now that I've listed out some of these laws, if you want me to do another more in-depth critique of a particular law. I was going to do more than just the law of irrationality, but I realized, well, I've got 4,000 words of notes, almost 5, so might as well just just do one for the moment. I love you guys to death. You guys are the best, and I will see you soon. Please let me know if you don't want me to do this, by the way. I'm planning on doing another law or 2, but if you guys don't want me to do that, just let me know. And I'm glad to be making videos again. I'm glad I'm not sick anymore. I love you guys to death, and you're the best. Thank you, guys.